Hello and welcome to the Empowering Law Firm Leaders podcast, where we'll be talking to experts across the legal sector to discuss the mindsets, behaviours, skills and digital tools that are needed to run a successful modern law firm. I'm Amy Bruce, host and marketing director at Osprey Approach. And today I'm joined by a leading UK employment lawyer, a former captain in the British Army specialising in HR and change management, and now CEO of Doyle Clayton, Tina Wisner. Thank you, Tina. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Amy, thank you for inviting me.
Absolute pleasure. So today we'll be discussing how to build and foster high-performing teams. We'll discuss the impact of having an employee-owned trust, the ingredients required to build high-performing teams, and how to future-proof your firm for long-term success. So, Tina, let's go right back to the beginning. If you tell us a little bit about your background and the experience that's led you to where you are today.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I've been an employment lawyer for about 25 years now, but I actually didn't qualify as a solicitor till I was in my mid-30s. So going right back, no one in my family had been to university. And when I was doing my A-levels, I really didn't have any clue about what I wanted to do for a career. But I enjoyed sport and I wanted to travel. And so a friend said, "Why don't you join the army?" And I thought that was a bit left field, but I inquired about it. And at age 19, I found myself at Sandhurst for officer training, which was really a life-changing experience. And I really learnt a lot from that. Now, women at that time had little, there weren't many roles open to women in the forces at the time. That's changed, of course, considerably. But back then, we're talking about the sort of late 80s, early 90s, they were mainly HR roles, communications roles, engineering roles. And so I found myself in a personnel kind of role, as they called it then. Now, there is a link, Amy, to what I'm doing, I promise you. But back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was lawful to discriminate against LGBT people serving in the armed forces. I should also say that prior to August 1990, servicewomen who became pregnant were compulsorily discharged. And I began to really question the sort of lawfulness and morality of this policy. I say policy, it was the law. But I also, around this time, began to feel a little bit uncomfortable about my own role because I was, in fact, signing the discharge papers for the compulsory discharge of men and women because of their sexual orientation. I would say that thankfully the law changed there in 2000. But long story short, all of those experiences made me to develop an interest in law and people. And so I left the army after 8 years and went to university full-time to study law and was fortunate enough to secure a training contract at City Smiths and moved to Doyle Clayton 20 years ago, and here I am.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, congratulations on becoming CEO. It was the start of 2024, was it?
January 24, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, yeah, for being there so long and becoming CEO, yeah, firstly,
Yeah,
congratulations.
thank
But
you.
you touched on slightly there as the reason why you moved from your position in the army to do employment law. Do you want to just expand a bit on that, on what you hope to achieve becoming an employment lawyer at that time?
I mean, I think really, I was, so I wanted to become a lawyer after my experiences, but employment law seemed to be the obvious thing to do. And I think, I wanted to better understand, I mean, it's a relationship at work. Employment law is about relationships at work and the way we interact and treat each other. And I guess I just wanted to do that from a professional perspective. I wanted to be able to say, I don't think that's right, or that is right, or this is how to do things. So that's why I became an employment lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that I'm sure that value set has helped you be, I mean, I said at the start, a leading UK employment lawyer, but I guess now moving into leadership, what do you think the impact has been being in the army on your leadership style and how you lead the firm today?
Yeah, I think it's only in recent years actually that I've realized those formative experiences did have a significant impact. What it helped me do at quite a young age, I was 20 when I was commissioned into the army. It helped me understand diverse teams, not only in terms of background and experience, but I think even then, recognizing the importance and understanding of like different communication and decision making styles. And I think that's a lot more complex than just introvert and extrovert. And I think what I recognized is if you can understand those different styles, you're able to leverage individual strengths effectively. But I think the most important thing that I learned from that experience is, trust and collaboration. Team members have to trust each other. I totally trust my senior team, and we work together to achieve, the goals. And I think that's really important to us at Dawn Clayton.
Yeah, and I guess just even having so much experience being an employment lawyer, I guess that
Yeah.
must have an impact on how you're now a leader and how you manage your teams. What sort of impact has that had on you?
Being an employment lawyer, well, it's interesting actually because when I'm leading my team, I don't really think about employment. I don't think, is this lawful? I don't think about that at all, which might seem bizarre. I just think about doing the right thing and being a good leader and making sure that I'm sort of, the best leader that I can be. I'm
Yeah,
still
absolutely.
learning there.
Aren't we all? Yeah, aren't we all? I guess, I mean, you've probably come across so many examples of how not to do it. Maybe it's just so ingrained in you of how to do it from your experiences. So that, yeah, that makes total sense. I guess being a leader in a law firm, and obviously you're the CEO now, but I know you've held other senior leadership roles. What are the top three lessons you say that you've learned about what it takes to be a successful law firm leader specifically?
Yeah. Well, I'd say I'm still learning. You're right. Before I became the chief exec, I was the head of our Reading office for several years. But I really, you learn every day. We all, you have to learn something every day. But what I do think that I have learned about being a successful law firm leader is the first thing is you have to be authentic. And for me, that not only means being genuine and transparent, but knowing my strengths and limitations and being honest about them. People often say to me that I'm not afraid to talk about anything with people at work. I bring my professional self to work, of course, but everyone knows about me, my family, what I do at the weekends, my career, my background. And I think that's important about being authentic. And I'm interested in other people. I want to know what they're doing. I think the next lesson I've learned about being a successful law firm leader is regular communication with employees. Now, poor communication often comes up in law firm engagement surveys. You may have heard it before, but it's a common thread. And we certainly still have work to do at Dawn Clayton, but we have regular team leader meetings, we have clear written updates, encourage all of our partners to actively listen. As my husband says, 2 ears, 1 mouth. I walk the floor on a regular basis so that I'm interacting directly with all employees, and I encourage my direct reports to do the same. We don't have offices. I think not many law firms have offices now. Some still do, but it's open plan. And it's really I think from what I think is for the leaders in the firm to demonstrate their presence and engagement with the team. And I think the final thing, Amy, is actually fostering what I call a client-centric culture. So if you create a firm where a firm-wide mindset, and this is not just the lawyers, this is everybody, where everyone has a focus on client satisfaction and builds strong client relationships, I think these things go some way into becoming a successful law firm.
Yeah, absolutely. We recorded a podcast recently. It's not yet been released, but it's with a business development expert. And one of the things they were talking about to help attract and retain clients was having that deep personal connection, being authentic, and ultimately being vulnerable. That's how you connect with people, is you share experience and you're vulnerable with one another. And I think that's one of the key points you mentioned at the beginning is having that personal connection and taking it beyond just what we need to do today, but making sure that you're collaborating personally and you're collaborating on a human basis. This isn't just like a role and work, is it? I guess that's where that's coming from.
I think, employment law is about people. I mean, we act predominantly for companies, but we do act, for quite a lot of individuals. And we do non-contentious work, of course we do, but a lot of our work is when things go wrong. I call it industrial divorce, and I don't mean that in a sort of trite way, but when things go wrong at work. And so actually what I have found is building that relationship with our clients. I mean, a number of our clients have been with us for years and years, and it's building that trust. And yeah, I hadn't thought about that before you said it, but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that client-centric approach and making sure that you're focused on the client experience again is key on not
Yeah.
only that client in that time, but continuing them as a long-standing client and building that relationship.
Yeah.
It's important that everyone's thinking about what that experience looks like at every touch point, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of our clients, are HR professionals, or people managers, and they can be at the sharp end of criticism. And so you've got to remember there is a personal element to it as well. But yeah, it's never done in employment law.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point you said about you're always learning, I think to also be self-aware and to be curious and to continue to learn, I think is also a
Yeah.
key part of not only running a successful law firm, but I guess being a successful leader and team player, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So Doyle Clayton has received several awards and recognitions recently. I've seen it all on LinkedIn. I see it on your
Well,
website. You recently maintained your tier one in Legal 500. So again, congrats. A great recognition of your team and the service you deliver. But aside from awards, which are of course lovely, how do you measure success and what are your sort of goals and values as a firm?
yeah, really, it's really interesting and complex, I think,
Mm,
actually, because, success. There's a number of key metrics that most law firms, including us, use to measure success. We're a business, so revenue generated, profitability, client satisfaction, number of new clients acquired, etc. And of course, these are, of course, really important. And year-on-year growth for us. We want to expand, we want to grow. But actually, I think for me, and for those I work with, it's two different things as well. There's two additional things. I think first is the retention of our staff. Many of our employees have been with us for a considerable period of time, 10 years or more, and that's at all levels, not just the lawyers. We live in an age where people move every few years, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that is great for many people, but actually I'm proud that we've got a lot of long-standing staff, and they're still developing, they're still progressing, they're still motivated. But I think the next one is more difficult to define, but what I would call is the mood music. You can tell a lot by the general mood in the firm. Now, this is of course more difficult to measure now we've got hybrid working.
mm,
And we continue. We don't intend to tell people they must come back to the office. So so many days a week. We do support hybrid working, which works for us. But I think having the balance is good. But I do think it's important to understand the atmosphere and well-being in the firm. And I'm often told, that this is the friendliest and most collaborative law firm that people have worked at. We promoted a partner in January, and he was saying that he feels like he's home, which I thought was,
mm.
he's been in lots of other law firms, so I thought that was quite a nice expression. I think this demonstrates success to me. All law firms talk about well-being. You just have to look on LinkedIn. Everything's about well-being, but I worry it's sometimes just another one of those sort of tick box exercises. And I think that what I try to think about is, the mood music. I look at people. Have they got their heads down? How do they look? Are they happy? Are they, are people talking at lunchtime? And so, you can tell a lot just by watching and observing. And so, we've got several initiatives. They're not groundbreaking, but we've got several initiatives, including something as simple as we have regular wellbeing walks at lunchtime in our offices where people get together, grab a coffee, and they go out and have a 35, 40-minute walk around either the city or in the Reading or in Bristol, wherever, and talk to each other. And I've learned more about people on those walks than I have actually, having a drink at a company party.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's, sorry, I'm conscious that's quite a lot about success, but what about our goals? So in terms of goals, we've got our financial goals and revenue goals and continue to work towards those. And also our goal over the last 10 years has been to become the UK's leading national workplace law firm, and for a long time we were just in the City of London, and Canary Wharf and Reading, and so I don't think we could have called ourselves national, but we have now just opened in Bristol this month. We've opened an office in Bristol, so that's continuing our goals. And then I think values, yeah, making sure we have that mix of client-centric culture but also employee-centric culture. If it goes too far one way, you've got it wrong. So you need a balance between both. And I think finally, I'm saying a lot about this because it's really important to me, actually. I've been doing loads of work on values. It's really, really important to me, and it's really difficult to get. So I think difficult to get right. I think values are more than just words that you place on your website. And we've shied away from that up until now. But what we've been doing this year is working with all of our employees, everyone, to understand what they say our values are. What are our values? What do they think? And so at the moment, we know that people are saying we're supportive, collegiate, and empowering, but there's still more work to do on that. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, and I'm scribbling notes because there's loads I want to go back to, and I want to make sure I don't forget it.
Yeah.
So I just go back to your bit about did you say it was mood music? I think.
Mood music. Yeah, what's the mood music?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love that phrase. And I guess that's linking in with the culture of the firm, and culture is
Yeah.
just it feels impossible to measure. And I guess as the CEO, it's difficult for you to be involved and hear and have your ear to the ground across the entire firm. So how do you make sure that the culture that you want to cultivate and foster is happening across the entire business? You're only one woman, there's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
How do you sort of manage that?
Really, really interesting question. So I think I've talked about being authentic and open and honest, and I think because I do that, that's what a lot, people, see it's okay. It's okay to do that. So I think fostering that kind of culture where people are authentic and honest, it filters down, and so I'm confident that there's a really transparent communication style here, and that if someone has got a problem, they would tell somebody and then they would come and tell me. I mean, I do often have partners, and we've got fantastic HR, function. Someone would say to me, I think there might be an issue there, or there might be an issue there, or I think you need to know this. So it's just trying to encourage that safe environment where people can speak up and
Yeah,
say things. Yeah.
I guess
But
it's
but the mood music, yeah, I think the mood music, you can walk into a building, you can just tell what the mood music is.
yeah, we had Kirsty Pappin, a consultant, on a previous episode, and we were talking about what separates really successful firms, what behaviors do they have that, potentially, not so competitive firms have. And she says you just feel it. You walk into a room and you feel their passion, their energy. And I guess that's sort of linking to that. And you mentioned earlier that you have a really strong and sort of tight-knit leadership team around you. And I guess that's how you make sure that these things are happening, is that you have a team behind you that you can trust, that you're all on the same page with.
I think trust is the key word for me. Trust I trust everyone I work with, especially the sort of leadership team. And we can say, we can have difficult conversations and say difficult things to each other, but there's always that understanding that we've got each other's backs, and, so that's really important.
Yeah, that's absolutely key. And just touching on some of the other things that you mentioned earlier about your values, you said that you are asking employees what they believe the values are from their perspective. And actually often I think we forget to do that. We're too busy trying to communicate what we hope, but actually we forget to bother asking. And those things that you've heard back from that, I'm sure, is such valuable feedback in helping you foster that culture even more, to embed those values even more. And maybe it's taught you stuff you didn't expect, has it? Maybe I'll put that question to you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we asked the question of everybody, why did you join Dortech Clayton? Why did you stay? And then there was some, really good things that came out of that. But
Mm.
then, there's always, you have to recognize not everything's perfect. Of course, it's not perfect. And so, yeah, some of the stuff that came out of it was actually we could do a lot better on communication. I think we're pretty good on communication, but still, some of the staff the employees want to know more. They want to know more about the finances. They want to understand more about profitability. So they want more transparency across the board. So, and we're working on that, really.
Yeah, once you get that feedback, it's so much easier to action those sort of next steps. And I guess that may be one of your secrets to building a high performing team, but what are your secrets? Share your secrets to building a team that is high performing and meeting goals and moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a really difficult one, because we don't always get it right, and I think because I have always been honest and transparent and approachable is another thing. I mean, Peter Doyle, who was a chief exec before me, and is now our chairman, said to me, you have to be seen to be the CEO, but be your own kind of CEO. You don't need to do what I did. And part of that is me asking for feedback and asking for information and stuff like that. So, there's still a lot to do. But in terms of secrets to building a high performing team, what we're working towards, is, so I think in my first year, what I've tried to start with is making sure, and it goes back to what we've been talking about, communication, is that everyone, no matter their role in this firm, understands what our goals and vision are. And I say to people, tell me what Dawn Clayton wants to be. And sometimes they go, I don't know. And I think, well, we've still got work to do. Or then often then people will say to me, well, we want to be the UK's leading law firm and national, and we want to, revenue goals they talk about. So I think what I've tried to make sure that all of our team leaders do is make sure that everyone in their team understands their role and importantly, why their role is important. So, for example, our receptionists know, who are fantastic. In fact, one of them is moving into a finance role because she's expressed a desire to develop that way. But the current receptionists, they know that when they speak to clients on the phone, that first phone call is equally as important, perhaps more so, than the overall outcome of the case that can be often, complex and difficult. And not just me, but our head of administration, everyone tells them that on a regular basis. And so you can see, I listen to them answering client calls, and you can tell that they completely understand that they've got a big role to play here, and it's not just a job. So I think that having that, sort of shared goals and values has helped us create a really strong sense of identity. And again, I think, you talked about walking into the room. I think you can feel the identity here. And it is genuinely collaborative and supportive. And, a lot of organisations use those words. I know they do, but these are words that are fed back to me. So I think, this is the steps we're taking to build a high performance team, is making sure that we're all on, I call it being on the Dawn Clayton bus. Everyone knows where the bus is going, and everyone knows what their role is on the bus. Can't just be a passenger taking the journey. You've got to be on the journey. So
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it. And maybe we can go back to your husband's advice of two ears, one mouth, in
2 years,
that,
1 month.
yeah, in that it's not just about communicating your values and goals. Of course, that's super important. It's great to hear that everybody wants to be involved more, but it's important that you then are curious and ask the questions to hear it back. Because if you find out that there's gaps or there's holes, like you said, you need to communicate more or communicate in a different way. So I think that's actually a really key part that's probably missed, is communication communication outwardly is great, but we also need to make sure that we're listening in order to know if we're doing it correctly.
I think that's right, but also something about being a leader is you have to make difficult decisions, and the thing about creating this environment where people are comfortable speaking up about what they want, there's no repercussions. You can criticize us, and we do get criticized, but actually sometimes people want things that are not realistic, and they're not achievable, and they're not in the best interest of the firm. They're not for the greater good of the firm. And so sometimes you have to communicate something that's difficult, that people aren't going to get what they want, or that idea is not right. And so listening is one thing, but when you encourage speaking up, be prepared to be prepared to deal in an appropriate way with some of the difficult stuff. You can't all be brilliant all the time, and we'd all be, kidding ourselves if we thought that it was. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's a great point actually. And I think being really clear on your values and your goals actually helps saying no easier because you can
Mm,
very clearly articulate why that doesn't meet the values or help you contribute to that goal. So actually it's not just about opening that opportunity, but it's about having a reason and clear answer as to why you've said no.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So as part of you touched on earlier, and I thought it's fairly topical, so I'll come back to it. But about the team being hybrid and that you're not always in the office all the time, I guess as building a high performance team, do you feel that has an impact at all on the way that you lead them or manage them from a hybrid point of view?
Um, I think, high performance teams, it's about understanding what the strategy is, what the goals are, where we're going, why we're doing it, and what their role to play is. And you don't need to be in the office to do that. But my own view is you do need to be in the office some of the time, and what we're trying to encourage. So if you work 5 days a week, we're encouraging that you come in 3 days a week. If you work 4 days a week, that you come in 2 days a week. And for most that works fine. Sometimes, someone might only be able to get in once or twice, but it's really, but also when people come into the office, it's making sure there's a reason to come into the office, making sure that there is a team meeting or there's some kind of collaborative event sort of thing going on. So I think it's possible. Yeah, of course it's possible. We've been doing it. It was thrust upon us. It was thrust upon us in 2020. And here we are, 2025, happy, successful, growing. So yeah, it's not without challenges sometimes, but it's possible to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're very, very much evidence of that. But you're right. I think to build that culture and to ensure that collaboration, it definitely doesn't harm to get in person with one another and share those experiences in
Yeah,
person. I couldn't agree more.
but there has to be a reason. But I think the key thing, and I've talked about this quite a lot, is trust. You've got to trust your employees. If someone's at home working, you trust them to do their job. You trust them, and if you haven't got trust, you haven't got anything really. So, and I know that a lot of organizations monitor, when you're on Teams, when did you log on, when did you log, we don't do any of that. Don't do any of that at all. So that is something I would never want to get to.
Yeah, and I guess you've always got that in mind of what your culture is when you hire people. You hire people that you feel fit in with that. That means you
Yeah.
don't have to have those behaviours and monitoring in place.
Yeah, and that's an important part of our recruitment process. In fact, it's not just, like I say, we've got a fantastic HR function, and Tasnim, our head of HR, she's got a lot of law firm experience, and she's really good at making sure that we ask questions around values, goals, those kind of things. Not just tell me about all the cases you've been involved in, and how many chargeable hours do you do? So it's a lot more holistic.
Yeah, that the mood music starts right at the beginning at
Oh yeah,
hiring. Yeah, you can't.
yeah.
It's harder to manipulate that once you're in there. If you're thinking about that right from stage one, then
And in fact, talking about the music, our marketing team have just put a video together, which is going to be played. It's a short video, which is going to be played to all new starters. It's part of the induction process. And it's describing one word what working at Door Clayton is like. And they've gone around, no prompting, no rehearsal, and they've asked people to say in one word what it is like working here, and I couldn't be happier with the outcome, because it is exactly getting that mood music right. So,
Oh, that's a great idea. I love that. I
yeah,
might steal
wasn't
that
my idea.
actually.
It wasn't my idea, but it is fantastic. I'll get Kevin on, head of marketing, to share it with you. It's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see that. Doyle Clayton is one of 20 UK law firms to have an employee-owned trust. Why
Yeah.
was that important for you? And I guess what impact has that had now that's been in place on your team and performance?
Yeah. So, why was it important? So we became an employee-owned trust in 2019. I think we were the second law firm to adopt the model. We were desperately trying to be the first. No, we weren't really. We were the second to adopt this model. And, it was important for us because it meant that we were able to control our future. So we had several approaches actually to be acquired or to be merged. And that wasn't really something we wanted to do, because we wanted to retain our identity and culture, and really be empowered to make decisions about our own future. And so I think we then decided that the EOT model was a good idea for us. And we think probably, what impact has it had on performance? I mean, if the firm does well, the employees do well. The fact that the majority of this firm is owned by a trust, and the employees indirectly own a stake in the company through the trust. And I think it sort of means that everyone's got a sense of ownership. And in basic terms, if the firm does better, then we all do better, because we pay some of our bonuses are paid simply because of the performance of the firm, and that we're a trust. So I think there's also some importance for the future as well, because it does give us that control about our future. We can make decisions quickly. We feel really empowered to plan for the future. The trust has a voice. The trustees have a voice in succession planning and the next generation. I could be removed by the trust. The senior partner could be removed by the trust. So yeah, I think it empowers employees, gives us a sense of control as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that um, earlier about employees and teams wanting more visibility on performance, and I guess
Yeah.
that encourages that, because it encourages everyone to play their part and have the impact that it increases that level of impact that they have, and the level of impact that they probably want to have now that if they're part of the trust. So I guess that sort of comes hand in hand.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, there's more we can do with the trust, much more, and we've got some initiatives that I can share with you in a bit if you like. There's a lot more we can do. And we became a trust in, 2019. Then we had lockdown, so we sort of stalled for a little bit of time. But I'm beginning to feel that it really is making a difference to us, and that we share a lot of information here, lots more than other law firms do. We share a lot of financial information. We share all kinds of things, and I think that does really help. Everyone sort of understanding what it means. Yeah, to be an employee-owned trust. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that, and it's a typical, I guess, direction for a lot of law firms to go is a merger or acquisition if they're
Yeah.
looking, as part of maybe succession planning or just part of a growth strategy. And that was something that Doyle Clayton didn't want to achieve. How else has the EOT model helped with the future of your firm? How is it impacting that succession planning in the next generation?
So The majority of the firm is owned by a trust, but of course we are a law firm and you have a lot of ambitious people. So we still do have, we still are able to have direct shareholders. And so, if people want to become, what might be an equity partner in a traditional law firm model, you can become a direct shareholder. So people are incentivized that way. You can own direct shares. And of course, in the normal way of any shares, people will earn dividends on profit and things like that. The trustee board, have a lot of say in what we do. So, for example, we've just opened an office in Bristol, and of course, those kind of decisions go through the trust board first to make sure it's in the interests of all the firm, of all the employees. So I think we think we're now less attractive to take over or merger. We certainly haven't had any approaches, I don't think, since we became an EOT, maybe one. So I think it's just giving us that different sense of identity now.
Yeah, and I'm sure it also impacts the type of people who want to work for your firm, and then the type of people that are attracted to joining Doyle Clayton from a cultural point of view. Again, we go back to those values. So I guess it helps set you apart. I'm sure it helps with retention, but also just attraction of talent to help you grow, which I know you said was one of your goals to become.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, some people apply to us not knowing anything about what an EOT is. It's still a bit of a secret being an EOT. I think it's, I mean, it's been possible since 2014, so it's been a long time. But as soon as people start hearing about the trust or they start researching us and they start understanding it, then they ask a lot of questions and they are really, really interested. I mean, we have an EOT team now. We have a team that provides this service to other law firms. Well, not just law firms. We have an EOT service that helps other organisations become EOTs, and that's been really interesting because we can say, well, this was our experience, and this is why we did it, and this could be the benefits.
Yeah, that's super interesting to also now offer that service and have that insight. I mean, yeah, to be one of 20, just the numbers just seem so low, don't they, considering it's been going for so long. So
I think
yeah.
there's more. I think there's more and more that will do it. It's it is a really good way of succession planning. Look, one of the benefits of being an EOT is that the original founders are able to realize their investment and be paid out their investment, and so it's a really it's a really good financial sort of model as well as everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. The aim of this podcast, how we sort of came about, the vision for the podcast was to inspire current and future law firm leaders to share ideas and initiatives on new ways of tackling current challenges. It was a way to inspire. What initiatives and innovations are you working on or experimenting on that perhaps you could share with us?
Yeah, well, it's so difficult in a law firm to be innovative because we have 5 generations in the workplace now, and there are certainly 5 generations at Doyle Clayton, and employees want different things, clients want different things. Clients expect, every client that you work with wants to be your most important client, and we try to create that experience for them. So there's a lot going on, but what I've been trying to do in this first year is think about how we can make our employee experience better. And so there's some of the things I unfortunately can't share, Amy, but what we are planning, we're certainly planning to do more to celebrate being an employee-owned trust. And so, since we became an EOT in 2019, we've made sure that our employees can benefit from I don't know if you know this, but you can pay tax-free bonuses up to £3,600 a year if you're an EOT, and we try to make sure that people benefit financially, but we're trying to do much more than just that. And so this year we're going to be celebrating National Employee-Owned Trust Day, which is on June the 23rd. And so we've got a series of events planned that week to highlight the sort of positive impacts of employee ownership. We're also trying to empower our team leaders. We've created a team leader structure. So obviously we've got our partners, but below the partners, we've now got team leaders, and they are having a lot more decision making and autonomy to do things, without coming to somebody, which I think is, really important. I think also it's sometimes just going back to basics and making sure we've got the basics right. Pay and benefits, of course, are really, really important, but you've got to think about, we're a relatively small firm, 100 people nearly, career advancement, working conditions, getting that work-life balance absolutely right, making sure that a lot of law firms are about the number of hours you bill, and that's something that we've really tried to shy away from as well. And also someone recently reminded me that employers don't really care about free pizza on a Friday and fancy offices. They don't want that's well, it's, I suppose it's nice, but it's not going to get somebody to join you. They want recognition, empowerment, flexibility, great leadership, work-life balance, to be heard. So those are the sort of they're all quite basic initiatives, but I think it's going back to basics and making sure we've got all of those things right.
Yeah, they feel like the fundamentals, but often I think sometimes they're easily forgotten in the day-to-day things that we need to achieve, and especially when things are very financial, billable targets. It's those things that are very easily forgotten and almost assumed that they happen naturally. But these things require time. They require time to be spent on them, to work on them, to improve them. I guess that's what you dedicate quite a lot of your time to as a CEO.
Yeah, actually, I'm still doing quite a lot of client-facing work, which is fantastic, but it's something I probably need to start doing less of. But yeah, I think getting these things right, leading a law firm and making sure that you're getting it right takes time. I talked about walking the floor. Some people might think, well, that's a waste of time. It's absolutely not a waste of time. I hear more and see more just chatting to somebody about, how's their week been? What have they got on at the moment? Those kind of things. So yeah, it takes time.
Yeah, you mentioned that the employee experience has been your priority for the last 12 months. Could you share what maybe your key priority is for the next 12 months of you being in the CEO position?
Yeah, is really, making sure that we grow, that we continue to, like I say, we've just opened a Bristol office. That's going to be a really important. We've just recruited 2 fantastic partners for Bristol. So I think the priorities over the next 12 months for me is the progress of the firm in terms of growth, profitability, maybe looking at where else. I talked about becoming, the UK's leading national workplace law firm. And so that means, maybe going outside of the sort of the south. So having a look at that kind of thing. So yeah, really the priority is now much broader.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good luck with that. It'll be super exciting to maybe we should check in 12 months and see how things go. But yeah, it's super exciting to see and so many things and initiatives to work on. We'll finish with some advice for maybe aspiring law firm leaders. What skills or characteristics do you believe successful and effective leaders need to possess, or maybe need to learn to acquire? Yeah, to be a law firm leader, you need to be today.
So I've been the CEO for just over 12 months, but before that I was the head of Reading for several years, and I learned a lot from my 8 years, in the army. So I think as a result of all this experience, I have been very fortunate to work with some really great, effective leaders. I think anyone who is aspiring to be a law firm leader, I think you have got to be authentic. If you're not authentic, your employees can see straight through you. And if you're authentic, it builds trust. And if your employees trust you, then they all collaborate together and they work together and they're motivated. So I think these are really important characteristics. I think you need to be confident, but not overly confident. I think you need to if you're communicating a decision, you need to stand by it, and be confident about it. You need to be resilient. It's not always an easy job, and things don't always go well. But be resilient. Recognize that not everything's going to be brilliant all the time. So, but I think the key thing for me, and this is something that I was told by Peter Doyle, one of our founding partners, who's now the chairman, when I first became a partner at Door Clayton many years ago, was forget yourself and focus on developing others. And I think this is the one thing that I would say to aspiring law firm leaders is if you focus on developing your team and your other people, the next generation and those people that you've got working with you, it really does foster a strong team culture. Now, in my experience, what this does is it actually increases motivation and productivity as well. And overall, it leads to a much healthier culture, which ultimately benefits everybody. But also it prepares the business for the future. So, I think that was the best piece of advice I've ever been given is forget your own ego, focus on others, and good things happen. And it's true. And I think for me that is key because I need to make sure that Door Clayton grows and flourishes. And yeah, long after I'm gone, so that's it.
Yeah, what a great piece of advice. I mean, you mentioned three sort of characteristics being to make sure you're authentic, to make sure you're confident, and make sure you're resilient. And I guess that requires an element of self-awareness. It's important to be aware of your your strengths and your weaknesses, but then ultimately once you've set that in place, it's very much about developing others and the team around you because you have to think of the future and you have to take yourself out of it. So there's the self-awareness element and then ensuring that you're passing on and improving and developing the team around you.
Yeah, I really believe that. And I think if you're self-aware and you know what your strengths and weaknesses are and you're honest, you can make yourself vulnerable by saying, I'm not so great at this. Actually, if you've created a team culture, people then want to help and do that, or you know where the gaps are, you know where you've got to recruit. So in my experience, certainly at Door Clayton, it's been a positive rather than something to shy away from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that comes back to your key messaging before very nicely in a full circle about being authentic and building trust, having trust at the center of all of this to make sure that you've got a people, employee focused, but also a client focused law firm and culture to breed that long-term success.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds really easy when you say it like that. But actually, it's not easy. And I think I wish more people would just be themselves and be authentic and understand that if you get these things right, the rest sort of just happens.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to end the episode today, Tina. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your knowledge. It's been really great to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Amy. Thank you for inviting me.